Farm Bureau guest line. Check out favorites.com and go with the home team at Mississippi Farm Bureau. Jackson Fuller writes at the Southwest Times Record, covers the Arkansas Razorbacks. Arkansas has Ole Miss coming to town this weekend. They are getting the back-to-back Mississippi section of their schedule. Jackson, appreciate your time this afternoon. Let's start with last week and really maybe the last month or so of the season. Arkansas has the huge win at home against Tennessee. They have the open date. Don't play very well, kind of get handled by LSU, and then a massive bounce back last week where maybe they played their most complete game of the season. Would you agree with that?
I definitely think on the offensive side of the football, it was by far Arkansas's best game of the season. They got Patrick Kutas back at left guard, who had been hurt for the first 7 games, and he made a world of a difference. I know the Bulldogs were also down a few guys on their defensive line, but you can just tell the offensive line looked more athletic, more physical with him there, and it gave Taylon Green more time. It allowed the running game to have a big day, and it was, by far, everything kind of came together under the new Bobby Petrino scheme Saturday against Mississippi State. I think defense, you got a little fortunate. You create your own luck with 5 turnovers, but the Bulldogs had a couple chances in the first half to maybe score touchdowns, and they came up just 1 yard short. And maybe it's a different, closer game in the second half, but over the course of the whole thing, great performance, but I know Arkansas wants to clean up the defense a little bit heading into Ole Miss.
One of the guys we talked about last week a little bit was Brillan Russell. We were visiting with one of your colleagues, and he said this is going to be Brillan Russell's turn, a young running back. They like the way that he has progressed, and he goes 16 carries for $175 last week. Was this the coming out party in your mind for Brillan Russell?
Definitely. I mean, I think the coaches have been careful of, putting too much on the freshman's plate early in the season, but they built him up bit by bit, and then Jaquindon Jackson goes down, and they really didn't have another option, but I also think they had immense confidence that Brillan Russell maybe not would play like he did last week, but he would have a good game. And I just think even when Jaquindon comes back, and he's been so good for Arkansas this year, they've got to find ways to give Brillan 50%, maybe more, maybe less, but he's got to be hugely involved in the offense moving forward. I think, a freshman running for 175 yards on the road in the SEC, the sky's really the limit for the kid.
So, outside looking in, but I think largely with Arkansas fans as well, 5-3 is already maybe more than most people thought this team was going to be. And yet it's where they are. The thing to me that's fascinating, when you think about teams that turn out to be good, especially when you looked at the way the season unfolded, usually they get better over the course of the season. Has this Arkansas team gotten better as the season goes along, or have they just kind of been the same team, and sometimes it's worked out and sometimes it hasn't?
I think they've gotten better. I definitely think they've gotten better. I think Oklahoma State, that game might have maybe fooled a little people because the Cowboys at the time were a top 20 team. They've kind of fallen off a little bit. So I think people saw that result and said, Arkansas is better than they were last year. And then maybe some not so good results, some not so good performances, especially offensively. But I do think game after game, the offense is getting a little bit better. Pittman and some of the players, too, this week have kind of spoken about just getting the required reps in a Bobby Petrino offense makes a huge difference. And that, Petrino, the last time he was here, the offense really kind of took off year 3, year 4 when he was the head coach. So I definitely think, and it's kind of similar to what I've already said about the Mississippi State game, the offense has clearly gotten better each week. The defense, it's been a little bit ups and downs, but for the most part, I think the fans are happy with how the defense has performed. Of course, a huge, huge challenge, and I think we're going to learn a lot about that unit this week against Ole Miss.
Yeah, and that's where I was going to go next. I do want to throw one in there. You mentioned Sam Pittman. I feel like most Arkansas fans had written his obituary before the season began. A lot of Arkansas fans really frustrated that they didn't make a change after last season, and it was almost kind of like a lame duck season. How has the perception of Sam Pittman changed throughout the course of the season?
The perception has definitely changed. I think there's still going to be a vocal group of fans that have higher expectations for the Arkansas football program as a whole. That maybe they think this program should be more consistent at that 8 to 10 win mark than, this year they look better. They're already 5-3, but in reality, you look at the rest of their schedule, they probably will finish with either 6-7 wins unless something crazy happens down the stretch. And then, it's an immense success for Sam Pittman this year. So there is that vocal group of people, but I do think that there is a huge part of the fan base that maybe is starting to realize, in this transfer portal era, odd years happen. Obviously, the hiring of Dan Enos last year was a huge mistake. It just did not fit with KJ Jefferson and some of the other pieces that they had that were brilliant under Kendall Briles, and going to a more pro-style offense was a difficult transition for them. So I think Arkansas fans are pretty much, I imagine they're coming to grips with Sam's probably going to be here next year as well. I think if they're going to likely get to a bowl game, if they can pull off one more upset against either Ole Miss, Texas, or Missouri, be 7-5. I think the over/under for them this year is 4.5. That'd be a really successful season by, I think, any way you look at it.
So you mentioned the challenge of this weekend. Ole Miss they really have not played well in Fayetteville. Have not won there since 2008. There have been a couple of games that were close. There have been more than that were pretty darn lopsided. This is obviously a different Ole Miss team. I would say the best defense that Arkansas has faced so far this year, especially in the front 6, front 7. What do you see as the biggest challenge for the Razorbacks in dealing with this Ole Miss defense?
Definitely what you just said. The front 4 against the Arkansas offensive line. The Razorbacks up front played brilliant against Mississippi State, but we've already kind of talked about some of the stipulations there in that matchup. This is going to be a huge test for Arkansas. They struggled defending or blocking against the blitz this year. They haven't been as bad blocking against just 4-man pressure. So maybe that's an advantage if Ole Miss, I haven't been watching all of their games super closely, but from what I gather, that front 4 is so talented they haven't had to bring too much pressure this year. I imagine, Coach Kiffin and the staff will maybe dial up some more pressures this week just after looking at the film, but Arkansas really struggled against LSU's front 4, and it prevented Arkansas from maybe taking advantages of some of the Tigers' weaknesses in the secondary. If Arkansas doesn't handle the Ole Miss front this week, it's going to be really difficult for the Hogs, I think, to keep up with Ole Miss's offense, because while the Rebels maybe haven't been as electric scoring-wise in the SEC as the fans would have liked, Jackson Dart, Trey Harris, that combination, I think you saw it kind of with what Garrett Nussmeier did against Arkansas. Going up against a pro-style, very athletic, very accurate quarterback could present some challenges for the Arkansas secondary.
Couple of minutes left with Jackson Fuller. He writes at the Southwest Times Record, covers the Arkansas Razorbacks. We're in this era where, with the transfer portal as active as it is, there's a good chance that you're going to face one of your former players when you get to a game. That may have already happened some with Arkansas throughout the season. This week, it's Chris Paul, who has been a big part of Ole Miss's defensive success at the linebacker. He's been their most consistent linebacker throughout the course of the season. What was the reaction from Arkansas fans when he left, in particular, and went to Ole Miss?
Definite disappointment, especially transferring to we don't have divisions anymore, but an old SEC West rival. I know there was some disappointment from Arkansas fans. And Pooh was a really popular figure amongst the fan base and coaching staff and the players, just in terms of a guy that really, and I think Coach Kiffin talked about this on the SEC teleconference. He wore his emotions on his sleeve, which is something I think a lot of fans they appreciate that. When we're frustrated, he's frustrated, and but I think he should get a warm reception if there's a moment for that, because he did some really good things for Arkansas, even though he transferred to a rival. And the players and coaches this week have talked about just their respect for him and happy that he's doing well now for Ole Miss.
It's funny. That's a little bit interesting in comparison to like the Juice Wells transfer from South Carolina. There was no love lost in that one as well. Hey, only a minute left. Quick thought on Ole Miss's offense that has had some struggles matching up with this Arkansas defense that at times has been pretty good.
They have. I mean, the performance against Tennessee was incredible. I think they played pretty well against Texas A&M, defending Marcel Reed for the most part too. Turnovers by the offense has kind of put the defense in some bad holes. But I'm worried about the Arkansas secondary this week. It's been banged up all year with Jalen Braxton out. They've shuffled some guys around. I think that's kind of the weak point that maybe Ole Miss and Jackson Dart can attack. But, on the flip side, if the Arkansas secondary plays well this weekend, then Arkansas is going to have a great shot at, keeping this close and maybe having an upset at home.
Jackson, thanks so much for your time. Appreciate you joining us this afternoon.